Patch 11.1.5 launches in less than 2 weeks, or maybe a few weeks, or a few more weeks after that. Let's talk about it. Hey, it's Soul, and this is Warcraft Weekly. It's more empty space than I know what to do with. You can help support the channel by liking this video, subscribing for more WoW coverage, and catching me where I'm live. Why is Blizzard time-gating the upcoming patch? Is a question many gamers have been asking since revealing its very predictable release date with a not-so-predictable schedule of what's happening. First, let's lay it all out using their helpful infographic. The patch launches the week of April 22nd, marking the end of the first third of Season 2, where it begins a month-long leveling event called the Winds of Mysterious Fortune. It's basically a 20% bonus to leveling, and bonuses if you're rolling through Dragonflight and the War Within zones, from reputation bonuses to power-ups that help you along to even more XP. Along with the patch comes the cooldown manager feature, and the Nightfall event becomes available. I'm not going to get too deep into the details there, but it's an hourly world event with weekly quests. It's got some very cool looking recolors of the Arathi sets to work towards. It offers champion gear with a focus on giving outdoor buffs and sits alongside the existing gearing paths. It might not be a bad idea to change things up a bit for your alts and have them focus on maybe just this feature as a different way to gear up if you're not pressed for time and you're tired of the usual routine. 1 month later, Horrific Visions return, appealing to new players who haven't done them before, delvers and solo folk looking for some additional challenge, collectors, and of course mains who want something to blast. And a few weeks later, there's a new limited time event called Dastardly Duos, where you and your team take on a number of dungeon bosses simultaneously for glory, and it's mostly glory, and that goes on until July 15th. I also want to squeeze in one more date. It's not confirmed, but at least based on Blizzard's very predictable schedule lately, patch 11.1.7 is likely to launch the week of June 17th while the Dastardly Duo event is taking place. Now, without knowing anything at all, I don't imagine this is going to cause any big shakeup, but I've seen more than a few commenters concerned that the next patch won't happen until after that event is over. Now, never say never, but I'm super confident they're not going to break their schedule. So lots of gamers are pretty pissed over the time gating, the delayed release of content that really should just be a thing day one. There's no way of knowing if like half of players are going to feel this way, but I bet that nearly all of the people who are mad, they're going to say it and say it loudly. And I don't blame them. It is kind of weird. I don't remember exactly when, but I remember the dev saying that numerous points that they want to get content out into players' hands as soon as possible, or as soon as it's ready, something like that. So why are we going to wait nearly a month for Horrific Visions and longer for Dastardly Duos? So what is Blizzard thinking? I have some theories, and to help me is a big old cup of copium, and you can get your own by checking out my store link in the video description. You like how I did that one, huh? But anyway, I think there are a few things going on here. Consider that there's another crowd of players who've been vocal when they say patches are in fact coming too fast, like they don't have time to finish one thing before something else begins. Also, I think back to when devs have said numerous times when talking about scheduling and patch cadence, they want something for players to look forward to on a regular basis, where one patch is done and the other one's already cooking. Maybe this means more than we thought, and we'll get back to that thought. Since Dragonflight, we've seen a few instances where features and new things are not available day one of the patch. Probably the most and least obvious is the trading post. All these assets sitting in our hard drives ready and waiting to go, with an emphasis on waiting. Dragonflight Season 4 started a month after the 10.2.6 patch, not long before the first season of Thunderstorm ended. The Kalimdor Cups and other racing, that didn't start right away either. Those were designed to be put on a certain schedule. This idea of delayed release is a bit different from time gating, as people like to call it, where Blizzard takes a long-term goal like powering up our artifact weapons and soul binds to accessing quest lines via Renown and stretch that journey over a long period of time, usually months long. A more recent example includes the Raid Renown track. And on that note, when are we going to hear about the cartel chips to trade in for gear? If you want to see it this way, they're all schemes to keep us subscribed. Like, how dare Blizzard disrespect our time, forcing us to stay on? And yet there are others who don't want to feel overwhelmed with the start of a patch being so packed that they feel pressured to make time for cramming in everything at once, especially if there's a possible feeling of falling behind. Something, the game's gotta respect my time, but we're also split like 20 different ways on what that means. I think that statement on having something just around the corner, it's not limited to patches anymore. Like there's so much to play with, Blizzard's carefully deploying features and walking the line between keeping players entertained and being overwhelmed. You're not wrong if you feel like the nature of WoW spreading events like this is insidious and it's focused on sub counts or income. The way I'm looking at these upcoming events and features, it seems as if the WoW team doesn't care to try and force these features to last all season, or to make it feel like we're being forced to lock in, or put us in situations where we got to choose between like one thing and another with our limited time. Even if you can understand that point, it's unsurprising some folks react thinking, well, that's different, or actually that's wrong. That's not how WoW is supposed to do things. They stand behind that principle of what WoW should be. Like patches are supposed to front load, and we should be looking at the guides telling us everything coming in patch whatever with the information overload, and we got all hyped up or burnt out before it even starts. Like that's the world of Warcraft, or maybe that's the WoW of yesterday. At least I think they've learned, or at least they've gotten feedback that just launching content when it's ready, that's like old WoW energy with their, back in the day with the old 6 to 8 month long tiers when the game was, when it was just raids and rated PvP and sprinkles of stuff between raid tiers. And now the team has the ability to pump out these more condensed and bite-sized activities that are both standalone features and don't try to suck up too much of the oxygen, like distract folks who are fine with just their usual endgame and space them out in ways that are easier to digest. Consider how Horrific Visions and Nightfall look like they're going to be up forever for people to eventually get to. Now that's pretty chill, outside of the corruptions that'll be shut down after the season ends. I'll talk more on that a little bit later. I guess I'm trying to say that the world is wide enough for WoW content to be more evenly distributed. Blizzard seems conscious they need to be careful of what kind of content it is and how impactful it is to the usual endgame. The challenge, I think, is if players' attention can also be more evenly distributed. And for you, viewer, if that's not good, then you should say so. And not to say they didn't screw up, I think they, like us, are still stuck in that headspace where the patch meant the front loading of content. You can see it's reflected on the roadmap, which gives some details of the first few months of the year, but none of the specifics as to exactly when or if it's going to be spaced out in this case. And the later part of the year only covers big bullet points like the seasons and Midnight's announcement and the Legion remix and, something to do with player housing. I think now is a good time for Blizzard to put out another dev water cooler or do an interview to explain how some content releases are going to work in the world of Warcraft going forward, where maybe the patch is just the data being downloaded onto our computers, and the focus is more on the actual features and events and how they're going to be staggered out throughout the season, if any, because of course, not every patch and season is built the same. This is one case where knowing in advance, it would mentally prepare people for what's going to happen. Of course, the milk's been spilt though. I think from now on, we're going to look at other kinds of patches with a bunch of unknowns and we'll second guess ourselves thinking, okay, is that new thing really going to happen at launch? So to sum things up, I think the awkwardness of having to wait longer after a patch launch, I see it as mostly like a marketing thing. Like, we know how long patches and seasons last, or at least we have a good foundation to rest on. Features and dates are always subject to change, that's the nature of game development, but I don't think it'd be such a bad idea to change the roadmap format up a little bit with a series of rows and points on the timeline to give us at least an idea where staggered events might take place. I mentioned corruptions a little bit earlier. Feedback like the article coming from Wowhead reports the corruptions themselves are almost cosmetic with how weak they appear to be. Numbers can always change, and especially because we have like a whole month after the patch, anything can change, but I have a feeling they're not going to change much. It's probably going to be just enough to justify Blizzard shutting them down completely at the end of the season without players feeling too depowered. Corruptions are a reminder of the borrowed power era when players were given these extremely powerful abilities and the game loops of the expansion revolved around them for the most part. From grinding for artifact power to jumping through all sorts of hoops for them Azerite essence upgrades to waiting a week to change your covenant to crossing your fingers for them Titanforge and corrupted drops. And in that case, there was an additional loop of powering up a cloak just to handle these awesome powers. The borrowed power era is over. And what we're getting with this Horrific Visions return is an echo of that under WoW's current philosophy. And that's going to be the show. I know I covered less than I wanted to because I've been spending a lot of time, settling in and getting the setup all ready for at least a first round. And obviously the stage itself, it's all a work in progress. I'm going to have another shelf, I think, there set up soon. I'll get some frames hung this way. Okay. I'm going to add a lot more color to warm up the space. So I want to thank you for your patience over the past few weeks. Of course, let's give a shout out to the awesome folks who've been hanging out on the streams. It's been great. To our beloved patrons, you folks are definitely helping with this move. Thanks to your contributions. And to you, viewer, thank you too. You made it to the end. You fed the algorithm. So now you can help out a little bit more by liking this video, subscribing for more WoW coverage. Catch me live, and I'll catch you later. I'd like to say just stay safe, stay healthy, and stay breezy, as if like, yeah, Soul, no problem, easy. But it's not easy. It's tough. It doesn't matter where you stand. I don't want it to be that kind of, luring in political kinds of stuff. It doesn't matter where you stand. Like, the world's vibes have been feeling so much more volatile these days. Everyone's angry, not everyone, but so many people are angry. The world feels unstable, and it's hard to resist wanting to just block everything and check out, which is nearly impossible because the news won't shut up, and it's not going to stop trying to get us folks, us normal-ish kind of people, to point fingers at each other and argue over what very little the people on top allow us to have. And those folks, they just watch the chaos from up on high. It's frustrating. And I just wanted to leak that little bit of reality, just as I do on occasion. I do encourage you to not just keep your head down and hope that it all blows over. I think that's what led us here in the first place. But despite me breaking character here, I still intend to be that moment of escape where you can rely on, where the worst thing here is how much I ruin delves forever. And we can focus on what's most important. What's coming next for player housing. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay breezy.